I mean, I think it says sentiment is very low, but I think more importantly, I think the credibility of the European Central Bank is being challenged in the sense that as much as they're saying we're going to return to an inflation rate which is close to our target, which is around 2%, what markets are telling the European Central Bank is that's not going to happen very soon. And I think that speaks about the lack of credibility of central banks, in particular the European Central Bank these days.
We've had so much of that discussion, not just in Europe, but we look at the BOJ as well, looking at the declining credibility of these central banks. So when you consider that, we saw, the ECB moving back to further into negative interest rates and negative territory. What levers do they have left here?
I mean, they don't have a lot of levers. We've talked recently about helicopter money, which is like a more radical approach to monetary policy. But I think there's an issue which I think is becoming more apparent, at least to me in recent months, which is their communications are causing a sense of desperation. And that sense of desperation is not helping with confidence. It's not helping with the forecast of higher inflation in the future. People assume that, well, this is going to take a long time to get there.
So is it really an issue of communication? Because we've heard several people say that, look, even though right now the numbers may not show the reflection of the negative interest rates, these things take time. It's about communicating the policy, and perhaps maybe it is the ECB not getting that across. Do you think that is a big part of this, the lack in confidence?
It is, but at some point that sentence, it takes time. At some point it needs to happen. And I think if you look back at the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, we heard that sentence too many times. And now people are assuming that, well, maybe it's going to take even longer than what we thought. And I think that's where the confidence becomes weaker. And I also think the central banks are not speaking very strongly, saying we're going to create inflation, even if it's higher than 2% for a while, that will be okay with us. They're still very careful in the wording that we're going to approach the target of 2%, but always from below. There's very little talk about if we overshoot, we'll be happy that that happens.
How have the recent attacks in Brussels, and also just when you look at geopolitical risks over the last year, how has that shaken confidence? How much stock do you put in that in terms of the larger factor here?
I think it's a small effect. Obviously, psychologically, people who are sitting in Europe today, those risks probably reflect negatively on their confidence on everything, including the economy. But I think what we've seen with interest rates and the central bank is something that is obviously beyond all these incidents or all the geopolitical risk. And I think there's something deeper beyond those incidents.
There has been one bright spot. We talked about this. Consumption representing 55% of the region's GDP, but it also accounted for 77% of economic growth since 2014. Can we continue to see the growth? But on the reverse side, is that enough to lift the economy? Clearly not.
I mean, it's not enough, but at the end of the day, the growth is not just going to come from the fact that people buy things, but also from the ability of putting everyone to work, having higher employment and having higher productivity. And those are the engines that are failing in Europe, and they're also failing in other parts of the world.
Okay, we're running out of time, but very quickly, the next big risk factor, is it Brexit?
To me, is a lot of political things that are happening in Europe that could derail, whether it's in Spain, Italy, France, the UK. There's lots of political risks.